Hey, what's up, guys? In this video, I'm going to be talking about the 5 things I wish I knew before I became a flight attendant. So for those of you who don't know me, hi, my name's Cassandra. I'm a certified flight instructor, so I'm a pilot who teaches other people how to become pilots. Before that, I worked with Delta Airlines briefly as a flight attendant. So in this channel, I talk all things aviation, whether you're interested in becoming a pilot, a flight attendant, or you're just interested in the industry in general. This channel's for you. Welcome, and I'm so happy to have you here. So let's get started. So the first thing I wish I knew before I became a flight attendant is that you can be prepared all you want during training, but once you get on the line, it's a completely different ballgame. Now during training, they prepare you for emergencies, of course, the most important thing, customer service, the layout of the aircrafts, etc., etc. But what they don't prepare you for are the real life scenarios that pertain to your job day to day. Things like bidding for trips, circumnavigating your iCrew, which is your employee website, finding your layover shuttle, checking in appropriately with your layover hotel if there's no flight leader, which is the person who is the leader of the flight. Pretty self-explanatory. Even simple things like finding out the layout of your airport, or if you have more than one, knowing where to go for your Delta Airlines terminal or gate. So if you're not an avid flyer, I highly recommend that in the very beginning, say you live 30 minutes away from the airport, that you allow yourself 2 hours and 30 minutes to get there. So that way you can figure out where to go, leave yourself room for error, and that way you are early and not just on time. There are also other things like passenger tendencies that you don't get to learn until you're actually on the line. Different destination airports have different behaviors. So for instance, if you're working a flight from Las Vegas to JFK, especially if it's a red eye, there's a great chance that a couple passengers at least are going to be under the influence of alcohol, and you might not even know it. They might have had 1 or 2 drinks at the airport. Maybe they were tipsy beforehand and then they just came to the airport. But either way, once you're up in the air and the cabin is pressurized, there's a great chance that they're going to suffer from hypoxic hypoxia, which is the lack of oxygen carried to the brain due to toxic substances in your bloodstream. This can present itself in many different ways. It could just be someone appearing a lot more drunk than they would be on the ground. It could be someone getting so sick that they end up throwing up all over the cabin, which happened to me, actually. Or it could get to the point that someone actually suffers from alcohol poisoning. It's not very likely, but it's something to keep an eye out for, especially on those flights. There are a lot of different tendencies out there for each airport destination that you fly out of, but that's just one example. Other examples like when passengers are boarding, there's going to be at least one person who asks to use the bathroom during the boarding process. And of course you let them go, but you have to know to tell them to hold back and wait until the boarding process is complete so they can get to their seat if they're far away. Another example would be that sometimes when we're flying, the cabin gets very cold. And so passengers will ask for blankets. And of course with Delta Airlines, they are complimentary. So before we even start the boarding process, if there was a previous crew that got off the aircraft, chances are the flight leader put the bag of blankets that they give us and put it in one of the overhead bins. So now it's up to us to figure out where they put those blankets. If there are none, then chances are we'll get another bag and then we'll figure out where to put that. But it's very important that every crew member knows where the blankets are going to be because it's almost inevitable that at least one person is going to ask for one. Another one is being on the lookout when we are about to land. So once we walk through the cabin with our final walkthrough, making sure everyone has their seatbelts on, the tray tables are up, etc., etc., we want to make sure that we are watching like a hawk all of our passengers to make sure that they do not get up, especially after we land and we're still taxiing, because there's a chance that an accident could happen, and if they aren't in their seats, then honestly it's a lawsuit waiting to happen. And sure, they could sue Delta, but that also means that they're going to look into what happened in this incident, look at what we could have done better, and if they deem it appropriate, that we could have done better, we could also lose our jobs, or the lawsuit could even fall to us. So you just never know. You want to make sure that you're safe, you want to make sure your passengers are safe. So that's another thing I'd like to impart for you guys. So the second thing I wish I learned before I became a flight attendant is that it is going to be tiring on your body. The majority of your job is walking through the cabin, walking from gate to gate, walking to the shuttle to take you to your layover hotel, and then finally you can rest. Even the constant change of pressure, going from ground level to 8,000 feet, because that's what the cabin is pressurized to go up to. So even if we're at 30,000 feet, it's going to feel like we're at 8,000. We would not be able to survive if we were actually flying at 30,000 feet in that pressure altitude. So it can be very exhausting on your body doing that so often, especially if you do a 3-day domestic trip. It's a lot of flying, it's a lot of walking around. I remember I wore these heels, I'll show you. So what I wore walking around terminals, around the airports, were these heels. They're not really good for your back, but it is required for women to wear at least an inch heel on the terminal. But then when we were in the cabin working, we could change into our cabin shoes, which for me, they're loafers. If you can see, they're kind of worn down, but there's a little bit of a wedge here. It doesn't really matter though, because they're so unbelievably comfortable. They really saved my butt when I would wear them, because these were just sometimes so painful. I mean, my gosh, my feet would kill me when I would get back from trips. But like I said, you can wear even just an inch, but it is required for women, like I said, to wear at least an inch in the terminal. Otherwise, there's this constant fear from flight attendants about getting reported either from gate agents, or maybe you run into an FSM, which is a field service manager, which is just a manager who reports to the higher ups at Delta Airlines. So, that's it. But it can be really hard on your back because your feet play a pivotal role with your posture. So maybe some of you guys know this about me, maybe not, but I actually majored in opera and I do performances, and we were always told not to wear heels like this because it messes up your posture when you sing. You want to be as close to the ground as possible, so maybe just a subtle heel, maybe an inch max, half an inch. So that's just something to kind of think about, but it really is just the constant walking around, the constant pressurization and depressurization on your body. It's a lot to deal with. And then even just sometimes your flights end at 2 in the morning, then you have to drive home, maybe another hour, maybe another 2 hours to get back. Those are just some things that I wish I knew about the job. Now, there are definitely ways to counteract that. So if you have a medical issue, Delta has no problem helping you along and saying, hey, not an issue. You can wear flats when you're walking around the terminal. Just make sure you give us a doctor's note saying that you do have a medical condition where you have to walk around in flats and not heels. You can wear an inch, right? And who knows, maybe you can get away with half an inch. So there are ways to get around it without being too hard on your body. And the third thing I wish I knew before becoming a flight attendant, it's associated with number 2, being that no matter how exhausted you are, allow yourself to experience the balance of work and free time. So typically, now this isn't for everyone's schedule, but just for the sake of simplification, you're going to have to work 3 days on and then maybe 3 or 4 days off.
So here's an example of actually a screenshot from when I worked with Delta. This is an example from my calendar. And so as you can see, I'm on for usually about 3 days. That NH04, that was when I was on probation. So when you are off probation after those 6 months, you won't have that anymore. So that is just an example of kind of what to expect.
So say you work a 3-day trip, you come back home, you're exhausted, and so you sleep through the whole day, you don't do anything because you're just so tired. Then the next day, for me, what I would do is I would feel so guilty about wasting my first day that I wouldn't want to do anything the second day. Then the third day, I was thinking about my next trip, and I would think about all the things that I would have to do, like grocery shopping, maybe cleaning, maybe seeing a friend or two, and then I prepare for my trip with my fourth day. Now, I know that it can be hard having that work-life balance if you're always focusing on your work, focusing on what you have to do next, what you have to prepare for next. But I highly encourage you to allow yourself the first day to rest guilt-free, do absolutely nothing, allow your body to decompress. And then the next day, try to get yourself out of bed, try to get yourself moving, doing something that you really want to do, just freeing up your mind, pretending like you have nothing to do for the rest of your life, and go do something fun. Even walking around or going to a coffee shop, calling a friend, but really allow yourself to feel like you're living your life and not just living for your career. So now the fourth thing I wish I knew before I became a flight attendant is that you should be prepared for emergencies to happen. Now, they don't happen very often, but they will happen. I can make a video about my experiences with emergencies, but even during my short period of working for Delta, I experienced at least 3 emergencies that come to mind, and you need to be prepared for them. It comes with a combination of having that innate grit inside of you and also the preparation, knowing what to do in each scenario. So I highly encourage you to study your emergencies, and once you get out of training, continue to study them. You'll get these books, these Delta Airlines books, a lot of them, as you can see. So each section that you go through during training, bam, emergencies are included. So you can use this. You have materials to your advantage. Make sure that you utilize what you have so you're prepared for the worst. And the fifth thing that I wish I knew before I became a flight attendant is that it can get very lonely if you're not careful. Now, like I mentioned before, if you're always focused on your career, so your next trip and your next trip and your next trip during your free time, it can turn into a vicious cycle where you feel like you're not really living for yourself anymore. So again, allow yourself that time to feel like your free time is yours. You can do with it whatever you want, and try not to think ahead. Now, if you're someone like me who has this, I would say, coffee shop personality, which means I like to be around people, but I don't like to really talk with people because it makes me nervous, then you'll understand where I'm coming from. So when I first got on the line, there were flight attendants who were seasoned, and they would say, hey, let's all hang out together as a crew and grab dinner or grab lunch or walk around the city together. And in my head, I would think, well, why would you want to do that? And that's because I was more of a slam clicker, which, for those of you who don't know what that is, it's somebody who gets their key to their hotel, their layover hotel. They go into their room and slam and click the door behind them. So they don't hang out with anybody, they don't talk to anybody until their next trip. And so that was me. Until 2 months down the line, that's when I began to really feel lonely. Now, of course, I mentioned the life-work balance. So working your job, you're working your career, and then when you get home, making sure that you're doing things to make you feel like you're living your life for yourself. Now, I wasn't really doing that at home in the beginning, and so my personal life suffered. I felt extremely alone. And so the only other people I could turn to were, you guessed it, my crew members. The thing about being a flight attendant is you're always surrounded by people. You're always around them. Sure, you get to hear really good stories, you get to tell really good stories, but essentially, you're surrounded by strangers. You're always around people, but you're never with them. And if you're like me, you crave a sense of community after a while. And I didn't feel like I was getting that anymore in my personal life or in my work life. So I eventually became one of those seasoned flight attendants who said, hey, let's go do something. And guess what? It worked. It worked out. We would grab lunch together, grab dinners, we'd walk around the city together, and it made me feel so much less alone. And I gained a lot of friends along the way. So there's something to be said for having those crew bonding experiences. So maybe if you're a little anxious about it, I encourage you to do it anyway. And who knows, maybe you'll meet some friends along the way too. Now, it all depends on your personality type, so I encourage you to look deep inside of yourself and ask yourself, how comfortable are you reaching out to people, talking with people, and can you save yourself from a mentally gloomy situation? You know, some people end up succumbing to this loneliness, and so it's really sad to say, but when I was on the line 3 years ago, it was kind of kept under wraps, but there were a significant amount of suicides within the flight attendant communities. And so it's really important to talk about these things because I don't think that it's talked about enough, and I really want to bring it to light to you. Now, there are a lot of reasons why this happens, but I've no doubt that this sense of loneliness that we get in this lifestyle, if we're not careful, could have contributed to the gloomy thoughts and state of mind for these people who had suicidal thoughts or tendencies. And I really want to keep you guys safe and provide a fair warning for y'all, because if I were to have known this ahead of time, I really would have appreciated it, and I would have been mentally prepared a lot more for this sense of loneliness, the sense of the lifestyle that was to come. And as long as you're prepared for it, as long as you're ready to feel lonely and you have a backup plan, you have someone who is ready waiting for your call, or even a therapist or someone you can talk to, then you'll be golden. You'll be okay. And hey, worst case scenario, if you don't like the lifestyle, it's great for a resume builder. So, those are the 5 things I wish I knew before I became a flight attendant. I hope you found it useful. If you did, feel free to give it a thumbs up. Feel free to subscribe or comment below. I read all of your comments and I love hearing your feedback. So, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.